The autumn wind swept through the concrete jungle of New York City, carrying fallen leaves and the faint smell of coming rain. For most people hurrying along the busy downtown streets, it was just another Tuesday. But for 12-year-old Alex Morgan, every day was a fight to survive. Alex sat huddled in the corner of Liberty Plaza, his back pressed against the cold stone wall of an office building. His faded blue jacket, once bright and new when his mom bought it for his last birthday, was now dirty and frayed at the edges. With his knees pulled up to his chest, he tried to make himself as small as possible while watching the world rush by. 8 months. That's how long he'd been on his own. 8 months since his mom's cough had turned into something the doctors called severe pneumonia, and then into something they couldn't fix. 8 months since his dad, broken by grief and drowning in medical bills, had walked out one night saying he was going to get cigarettes. Alex had waited up all night, but his dad never came back. The foster home they put him in wasn't bad, not really. The lady who ran it seemed nice enough, just overwhelmed with too many kids and too little help. After the third time, Alex was forgotten, left behind at school until the janitor found him asleep in the library. He decided he might as well look after himself. No one seemed to notice when he left for good. Just gotta be smart, Alex whispered to himself, repeating his daily mantra as he scanned the plaza. Watch everything. Trust no one. Stay invisible. Being invisible wasn't hard in New York. People had their own problems, their own rushing lives. Nobody looked twice at a skinny kid with dirty clothes unless he was causing trouble. And Alex was careful never to cause trouble. From his hiding spot, he had a perfect view of the food vendors who set up in the plaza each day. He'd learned their routines, figured out which ones sometimes threw away good food and which ones would chase him away if he dared ask for leftovers. There was the old lady with the pretzel cart who would accidentally drop a pretzel near the trash if she spotted him lingering too long. There was the grumpy hot dog man who shouted at anyone who came close without money ready in hand. And then there was the new guy, the one with the fancy sandwich cart who had shown up 3 days ago. His sign read gourmet handcrafted sandwiches in fancy lettering, and people in business suits lined up to pay $12 for lunch. $12? Alex could stretch that into food for nearly a week if he was careful. But something about this vendor made Alex's skin crawl. Maybe it was the way he smiled at customers but snarled when no one was looking. Or maybe it was what Alex had seen last night. Alex had been sleeping in a cardboard box behind the dumpsters of a nearby restaurant when a noise woke him. Peeking out, he'd spotted the sandwich vendor wheeling his cart into a storage garage across the alley. The man had left the door slightly open, and Alex's curiosity got the better of him. Creeping closer, he peered through the crack in the door. What he saw made his stomach turn. Rats. Big ones. They were climbing all over the vendor's supplies, nibbling at bread and meat left uncovered. The vendor had come back moments later, shooed them away half-heartedly, and covered everything with a dirty tarp before locking up. Alex had thought about telling someone, but who would listen to a homeless kid? Besides, staying invisible meant not drawing attention to himself, so he decided to just avoid that vendor's food and keep his distance. But today, as rain clouds gathered overhead, Alex watched the usual lunchtime crowd form in the plaza. The sandwich vendor seemed to be doing particularly good business, probably because his cart was positioned nearest to the entrance of the towering glass building where important-looking people worked. Alex's attention was drawn to a man in an expensive suit stepping out of a sleek black car. Even from a distance, Alex could tell this wasn't just another businessman. There was something about the way everyone reacted to him, the way the doorman straightened, the way people stepped aside, the way 2 serious men in dark suits flanked him like shadows. This man was somebody important. Alex watched as the important man paused, said something to one of his guards, and then made his way toward the sandwich cart. The vendor's face lit up with a smile so big it looked like it might split his face in two. As the man approached, the vendor began preparing what looked like his most impressive creation, adding extra meat and flourishing with the condiments. For a moment, Alex forgot his rule about staying invisible. All he could think about were those rats, crawling over the ingredients that were now being handed to this unsuspecting man. Before he knew what he was doing, Alex was on his feet. "Don't eat that." The words burst from his mouth as he darted across the plaza, weaving between startled office workers. "Please, mister, don't eat that sandwich." The important man, William Hayes, though Alex didn't know that yet, froze with the sandwich halfway to his mouth. His security guards immediately tensed, one moving toward Alex with a stern expression. People around them stopped to stare, and Alex suddenly remembered his most important rule: never draw attention to yourself. But it was too late now. Everyone was looking at him. The dirty kid making a scene in the middle of a respectable business plaza. The sandwich vendor's face had transformed from a welcoming smile to a furious glare. Alex felt his heart hammering in his chest. He had just made himself very visible indeed. The important man lowered the sandwich slowly, his sharp eyes fixed on Alex with an intensity that made the boy want to run. But something held him in place. Maybe it was hunger, maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the tiny hope that someone might actually listen to him for once. "What did you say?" the man asked, his voice neither angry nor friendly, just curious. Alex swallowed hard. Rain began to fall in light drops around them, speckling the pavement with dark spots. In that moment, with all eyes on him, Alex made a choice that would change his life forever. Instead of running away, he took a step forward. "Please don't eat that sandwich, sir," he said, his voice smaller now but still determined. "It's not safe. I can show you why." The rain fell harder, but neither the boy nor the billionaire moved. For the first time in 8 months, someone was actually looking at Alex, not through him, not past him, but directly at him. And somehow that felt more terrifying and more important than anything else. The rain started coming down harder as William Hayes stood completely still, the sandwich frozen in his hand. People hurried past with newspapers over their heads, seeking shelter from the sudden downpour, but William didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the small, soaking wet boy standing before him. Alex shifted nervously from one foot to another. His worn-out sneakers were already soaked through, and cold water dripped from his hair into his eyes. But he stood his ground. After coming this far, after making himself so visible, he couldn't back down now. One of William's security guards, a tall man with a shaved head and an earpiece, stepped forward. "Sir, we should get you out of this rain. The car is waiting." William raised his hand slightly, signaling the guard to wait. "You said this food isn't safe," he said to Alex, his voice calm but curious. "What do you mean by that?" Before Alex could answer, the sandwich vendor pushed his way forward. His earlier smile was gone, replaced by an angry scowl. "Don't listen to this street rat," he shouted, pointing a finger at Alex. "He's just trying to ruin my business. Probably wants to steal food or money." Several people who had been waiting in line for sandwiches turned to stare. Some backed away, looking uncertainly at their already purchased food. Others muttered about these homeless kids and getting worse all the time. Alex felt his face grow hot with shame. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe he should have stayed invisible. Nobody ever believed kids like him anyway. He took a step back, ready to run, but William's voice stopped him. "I'd like to hear what the boy has to say," William said firmly. There was something in his tone that made everyone go quiet, even the angry vendor. William turned back to Alex. "Go on." Alex took a deep breath. "I've been sleeping behind the dumpsters across from where he stores his cart," he said, nodding toward the vendor. "Last night I saw rats all over his supplies, big ones. And yesterday morning, I watched him drop meat on the ground and put it right back in his container. He didn't even rinse it off." The vendor's face turned bright red. "He's lying," he shouted, but there was a new note in his voice, fear. "You can't believe a filthy street kid over a legitimate businessman." William looked thoughtfully from Alex to the vendor. Then he turned to his assistant, a woman in a sharp suit who had been quietly standing nearby, typing rapidly on her phone. "Lisa," William said quietly, "could you make a call to the health department? I think we might have a situation here that requires their attention." Lisa nodded and stepped away, speaking rapidly into her phone. The vendor's face went from red to pale in seconds. "You can't do that," he sputtered, looking at William. "Do you know how long it takes to get all the permits for this spot? Who do you think you are anyway?" One of the security guards stepped forward. "This is William Hayes," he said flatly, "and yes, he can do that." Alex's eyes widened. Even he had heard of William Hayes. The tech billionaire was in the news all the time. Alex sometimes read discarded newspapers to practice the reading skills his mom had taught him, and William Hayes's name appeared frequently, usually next to words like richest, powerful, and innovative. The vendor seemed to deflate as he realized who he was dealing with. He began backing away toward his cart. Look, there might have been a small issue with storage last night, but I cleaned everything this morning. Everything's fine, really. William looked down at the sandwich in his hand, then casually dropped it into a nearby trash can. We'll let the health inspectors determine that, he said calmly. Within minutes, a black government car pulled up at the edge of the plaza, and two officials in uniforms stepped out, carrying clipboards and looking serious. Liz had guided them over to William, who explained the situation briefly. The officials nodded and approached the vendor's cart. As they began their inspection, William turned his attention back to Alex, who was standing awkwardly to the side, dripping wet and shivering slightly. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the damage was done. Alex was soaked to the bone. "You might have saved me from getting very sick," William said. "Thank you." Alex shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "It's okay. I couldn't let you eat that." "Why not?" William asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Most people wouldn't bother warning a stranger." Alex looked down at his wet shoes. "My mom always said that warning people about unsafe food was like saving lives," he said quietly. She was a food safety inspector before she got sick. Something in William's expression changed. He studied Alex more carefully, taking in the boy's thin frame, the dark circles under his eyes, the clothes that were too small and worn through in places. "Where is your mother now?" he asked gently. Alex kept his eyes on the ground. "She died 8 months ago." "And your father?" "Gone," Alex said simply. He didn't want to say more about that. Didn't want to admit that his own father had abandoned him. Didn't want this important man to know just how unwanted he really was. By this time, the health inspectors had pulled the vendor aside and were speaking to him in serious tones. One of them was taking photos of the underside of the cart, where spots of mold were clearly visible. The vendor was gesturing wildly, making excuses, but the inspector just kept writing on his clipboard. William watched the scene for a moment, then turned to Lisa. "The boy is soaked and probably hungry. There's that diner around the corner, Rosie's, I think it's called. Could you call ahead and get us a quiet table in the back?" Lisa nodded and stepped away once more. William turned back to Alex. "Would you join me for lunch?" he asked. "A proper lunch at a clean place. I'd like to hear more about your mother, if you're willing to tell me." Alex hesitated. Street smarts told him to be cautious of strangers offering things, even famous billionaires. But something about William's manner seemed genuine, and the thought of a hot meal in a dry place was almost too good to resist. "Why would you want to have lunch with me?" Alex asked suspiciously. William smiled slightly. "Because you just did something brave and selfless," he said. "And in my experience, people like that are worth getting to know." Alex stood there for a moment, weighing his options. Finally, his growling stomach made the decision for him. "Okay," he said, "but I'm not promising to tell you anything." "Fair enough," William replied with a nod. "Shall we go?" As they walked away from the plaza, Alex couldn't help glancing back at the sandwich vendor, who was now watching his cart being temporarily shut down. For the first time in months, Alex felt something he'd almost forgotten, a small sense of justice in an unfair world. Rosie's diner was warm and smelled like coffee and fresh bread. The moment Alex stepped inside, his stomach growled so loudly that a waitress passing by with a tray of pancakes smiled at him. He quickly looked down at his feet, embarrassed. William spoke quietly to the hostess, who nodded and led them to a booth in the back corner, away from the windows and other customers. Alex slid into the red vinyl seat, feeling out of place. His wet clothes had started to dry but left dirty marks on the clean bench. He tried to sit on just a small part of the seat, not wanting to make more of a mess. "Get comfortable," William said, noticing Alex's stiff posture. "The seats have seen worse, I promise you." A waitress with gray hair pulled into a bun came over with menus. Her name tag read Dot. She looked at Alex's wet clothes and thin face, then at William in his expensive suit. Her eyebrows raised slightly, but she said nothing about the odd pair. "What can I get you boys to drink?" she asked. "Coffee for me, please," William said. "And for you, Alex?" Alex hesitated. In the past months, he'd learned to be careful about asking for too much. Just water is fine, he said quietly. How about a hot chocolate? William suggested. Might help warm you up. Alex's eyes brightened despite himself. Really? I mean, yes, please. Dot nodded and left to get their drinks. William opened his menu, but Alex just stayed at his, overwhelmed by the choices. It had been so long since he'd sat in a restaurant and ordered food. Usually he scavenged from dumpsters behind restaurants like this one, waiting until closing time when they threw out the day's leftovers. Get whatever you want, William said, not looking up from his menu. I recommend the club sandwich, but the burgers are good too. When Dot returned with their drinks, William ordered a club sandwich and Alex, after stumbling over his words, asked for a cheeseburger with fries. As they waited for their food, an awkward silence fell between them. William took a sip of his coffee. So, your mother was a food safety inspector. Alex wrapped his hands around the hot chocolate mug, soaking in its warmth. He nodded slowly. For 15 years. She worked for the city health department. She taught you well, William said. Most people wouldn't recognize signs of food contamination, especially at your age. Alex shrugged. Mom would come home with stories all the time. The good places she inspected, the bad ones. She'd point things out when we ate at restaurants too, stuff most people don't notice, like how the staff handled food or if the counters were really clean. His voice grew softer. She was really good at her job. I can tell, William said. She must have been very proud of you. Alex looked down at his hot chocolate. I guess. Their food arrived, steaming hot and smelling delicious. Alex stared at his plate, a massive burger with melted cheese oozing down the sides and a huge pile of golden fries. He hadn't seen this much food at once in months. He carefully cut the burger in half, a habit his mother had taught him to check if meat was properly cooked. William noticed but said nothing, just unwrapped his silverware and started on his own sandwich. Alex took a small bite, then another, trying to eat slowly despite his hunger. But soon he was devouring the burger, barely taking time to breathe between bites. Easy, William said gently. It's not going anywhere. And we can order more if you're still hungry. Alex slowed down, embarrassed. Sorry, he mumbled through a mouthful of fries. No need to apologize, William said. Just don't want you getting sick. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Alex finished his burger and started carefully arranging his remaining fries in science order, an old habit when he was nervous. Can I ask you something? William said finally. Where have you been staying? Since your mother passed away. Alex tensed. This was dangerous territory. If he told the truth, this man might call social services and Alex would be put back in the system, back to being forgotten and shuffled around. Around, he said vaguely. Different places. William set down his sandwich. Alex, I'm not going to force you to tell me anything you don't want to. But I think you know I can help you if you'll let me. Why would you want to help me? Alex asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. You don't even know me. Fair question, William said. He thought for a moment. Let me tell you a story. When I was building my first company, I was working so hard I barely slept. One night, I was coding in my apartment and I smelled smoke. The building was on fire. I ran out, but then I heard my elderly neighbor's dog barking. She wasn't home, but her dog was trapped inside. William took a sip of his coffee. I ran back in and got the dog out. Firefighters later told me I could have died. People called me a hero, but I didn't feel like one. I just did what seemed right at that moment. He looked directly at Alex. Today, you did the same thing. You saw danger and you spoke up, even though it was risky for you. That says a lot about who you are. Alex pushed a fry around on his plate. I just didn't want you to get sick. Exactly, William said. And now I don't want you to be out on the streets, so maybe we can help each other. Alex looked up, meeting William's eyes. My dad left, he said suddenly. After Mom died, the medical bills were too much. One night he said he was going out for cigarettes and never came back. They put me in a foster home, but he trailed off, remembering the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible. But, William prompted gently. Nobody really saw me there, Alex finished. I was just one more kid to feed, so I left. Been on my own since. William nodded, his face solemn. How long? 8 months, Alex said quietly. I sleep wherever I can find a dry spot. Under bridges, in doorways, behind dumpsters. I find food where I can. He glanced out the window. Winter's coming though. I'm not sure what I'll do when it gets really cold. The waitress came by to refill William's coffee and check on them. Everything good here? She asked. William nodded and she left. After she was gone, he leaned forward. Alex, I have a proposition for you, he said. No pressure and you can say no. But I'd like to help you find a safe place to stay while we figure out a more permanent solution. Alex's heart raced. This could be a trick. But the alternative was going back to the streets, back to the cold and hunger. And something about William made Alex want to trust him, despite everything his street experiences had taught him. Why would you do that for me? Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. William smiled slightly. Because 8 months ago, the world failed you when you needed help the most. And today, you helped me anyway. That's a person worth investing in. Alex stared at his empty plate, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. Finally, he looked up. What kind of proposition? He asked. 3 days later, Alex stood in the middle of a hotel suite bigger than any apartment he'd ever lived in. The carpet was so thick his feet sank into it. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a view of Central Park that people paid thousands to see. And somehow, this was where he was staying, at least for now. After their lunch at Rosie's Diner, William had offered Alex a temporary place to stay while they figured things out. Alex had been suspicious at first, but when William explained that he'd be staying in a hotel suite with a separate bedroom where William's staff could check on him regularly, Alex had cautiously agreed. It was better than another night behind a dumpster. Now, wearing new clothes that Lisa had purchased for him, jeans that actually fit, a warm sweater, and sneakers without holes, Alex still couldn't believe the change in his circumstances. He'd had 3 hot meals a day, a hot shower whenever he wanted, and a bed so soft he'd almost cried the first night. A gentle knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Alex, it's Dr. Chen, a friendly voice called. Come in, Alex replied. The door opened to reveal a kind-faced woman in her 50s carrying a medical bag. Dr. Chen had visited each day to check on Alex's health. How are you feeling today? She asked, setting her bag down on the coffee table. Better, Alex said honestly. His persistent cough had improved with the medicine she'd given him, and the scratches on his arms were healing nicely. May I check your weight again? She asked. When Alex nodded, she took out a portable scale and had him stand on it. She noted the reading with a small smile. That's good. You've gained 2 pounds already. The proper nutrition is helping. As Dr. Chen continued her examination, Alex's mind wandered to William. The billionaire had been busy with meetings the past 2 days, but had called each evening to check on him. William had mentioned that his team was looking into some things, but hadn't explained further. All done, Dr. Chen announced, packing up her equipment. You're recovering well, Alex. Just keep eating regular meals and taking your vitamins. Thank you, Alex said quietly. Despite everything, politeness was something his mother had drilled into him, and old habits died hard. After Dr. Chen left, Alex wandered around the suite restlessly. Despite the luxury surrounding him, he felt anxious. This couldn't last. Nothing good ever lasted in his experience. Soon William would get tired of his charity project and send Alex back to foster care or onto the streets. The suite's phone rang, startling him. After a moment's hesitation, he picked it up. Hello. Alex, it's William. How are you doing today? Alex relaxed slightly at the familiar voice. I'm okay. Dr. Chen says I gained 2 pounds. That's excellent news, William said, sounding genuinely pleased. Listen, I'm on my way back to the hotel. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you. Would it be all right if I bring some people with me? My lawyer, Tom, and a woman named Rita who works with the Child Welfare Department. Alex's heart sank. So this was it. He was being sent back into the system. He should have known better than to get comfortable. Alex, are you still there? William asked. Yeah, Alex said, trying to keep his voice steady. That's fine. Good. We'll be there in about 20 minutes. After hanging up, Alex sat on the edge of the sofa, his mind racing. Should he run? He had new clothes now, and he'd managed to tuck away some of the snacks from the minibar in his backpack. He could probably find a new hiding spot somewhere the authorities wouldn't look for him. But where would he go when winter hit? And running would mean never knowing why William had helped him in the first place. Before he could make up his mind, there was another knock at the door. It had been less than 20 minutes. They must have already been on their way when William called. Taking a deep breath, Alex opened the door. William stood there with two people Alex didn't recognize. A tall man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase, and a black woman with short hair and a kind smile holding a folder. "Alex," William said warmly, "this is Tom Parker, my personal attorney, and Rita Johnson from Child Protective Services." Alex tensed at the mention of CPS, but he nodded politely. "Hello." They moved into the sitting area of the suite. Alex perched on the edge of a chair, ready to bolt if necessary. William noticed his posture and gave him a reassuring look. "I asked Tom and Rita here because we've been doing some investigating," William explained. "With your permission, I'd like them to share what they found." Alex nodded cautiously. Tom cleared his throat and opened his briefcase. "Alex, we've been looking into your situation. Your father, Robert Morgan, appears to have left the state. He's currently in Arizona, working under a slightly different name. He's made no attempts to find you or check on your welfare." A dull pain throbbed in Alex's chest. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. "As for your previous foster placement," Rita said gently, "there were clear violations of care standards. You should never have been forgotten or neglected like that. The system failed you, and I'm deeply sorry." Alex stared at his hands. "It doesn't matter now." "Actually, it does," William said firmly, "because we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again." Alex looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" William leaned forward. "Here's what I'm proposing. I'd like to become your temporary guardian while we work on finding a permanent solution. This would be legal and above board, with regular check-ins from Ms. Johnson to ensure everything is going well." Alex's eyes widened. "You want to be my guardian? Why?" "Because everyone deserves a chance, Alex," William said simply. "And because I think we can help each other." "Help each other how?" Alex asked, suspicious again. "What do you get out of this?" William exchanged glances with Tom and Rita before answering. "During our investigation, we discovered something I need to tell you about. The hospital where your mother worked was recently acquired by a healthcare company called Health First." Alex nodded slowly. "Yeah, Mom was worried about that before she got sick," said the new owners were cutting corners. "They were," William said grimly. "And one of those cuts was in the benefits department. The clerical error that cancelled your mother's insurance, the one that prevented her from getting early treatment for her pneumonia, happened because they reduced staff and implemented a flawed automated system." Tom handed William a document, which he passed to Alex. "Health First is a subsidiary of Venture Health Partners, which is partly owned by my investment firm." Alex stared at the paper, not fully understanding the corporate structure but grasping the implication. "So, your company had something to do with my mom's death?" William met his gaze steadily. "Indirectly, yes. I didn't know about these specific cost-cutting measures, but as an investor, I bear some responsibility. Which is another reason I want to help you, Alex. I can't undo what happened to your mother, but I can make sure you are taken care of the way she would have wanted." Alex fell silent, trying to process this information. Part of him wanted to be angry, to blame this rich man for his mother's death. But another part recognized that William was being honest when he could have hidden the connection. "You don't have to decide right now," Rita said kindly. "There are other options we can." "What would it mean?" Alex interrupted, looking at William. "If you became my guardian." "It would mean you'd have a stable home, proper care, and education," William replied. "You'd live at my residence in Connecticut during school breaks, with appropriate staff to look after you. During the school year, you'd attend a boarding school where you can catch up on the education you've missed." "Boarding school?" Alex echoed. "I don't know if I'm smart enough for that." William smiled slightly. "Your mother was a professional with a science background, and you're clearly intelligent. With proper support, I think you'll do fine." Alex looked at each of their faces, searching for deceit but finding none. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," William said. "Take all the time you need." But deep down, Alex already knew his answer. For the first time in 8 months, someone was seeing him, really seeing him. Not as a problem to be solved or a case to be managed, but as a person who mattered. And that, more than the fancy hotel room or the expensive clothes, felt like coming home. William sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the documents spread across the desk. Outside, New York City glittered in the darkness, millions of lights blinking like stars. But William couldn't appreciate the view tonight. His mind was too full of what he'd discovered over the past few days. He picked up a photograph, a woman in her early 30s with Alex's same warm brown eyes and slight dimple in her left cheek. Catherine Morgan, Alex's mother. In the picture, she wore a white lab coat and smiled confidently at the camera. It was her employee ID photo from St. Mary's Hospital, where she'd worked as a microbiologist in the lab before becoming a food safety inspector for the city. William set down the photo and rubbed his tired eyes. His team had worked around the clock to piece together the events that had led to Catherine's death and Alex's homelessness. What they'd found made William's stomach turn. Health First's takeover of St. Mary's had been heralded as a streamlining success in the business press. William remembered approving the investment himself, impressed by the projected 18% return. What the cheerful financial reports hadn't mentioned was how that return was achieved, by cutting staff, reducing benefits, and implementing automated systems that weren't ready for full deployment. Catherine Morgan had been one of the casualties of those cuts. When she first developed pneumonia, the new automated system had incorrectly flagged her insurance as inactive due to a software glitch. By the time the error was discovered, her condition had worsened significantly. The out-of-pocket costs for her initial treatment had drained her savings, and the aggressive infection had ultimately taken her life. William picked up another document, the report from the private investigator he'd hired to track down Robert Morgan, Alex's father. The man had abandoned his son and fled to Arizona, where he was now working as a bartender under the name Rob Morris. He'd made no attempts to contact Alex or check on his welfare. The investigator's notes mentioned that Robert had a new girlfriend and seemed to be starting fresh, as if his previous life and son had never existed. A soft knock at the door interrupted William's dark thoughts. "Come in," he called. Lisa entered, carrying a tablet. "Sir, the board members are requesting an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. They've heard rumors about your interest in the Morgan case and the potential lawsuit against Health First." William's jaw tightened. News traveled fast in the business world. "Schedule it for 9 a.m. and prepare the data on all our healthcare investments. I want a complete ethical review." Lisa nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Also, Alex has asked to speak with you when you have time." William checked his watch, almost midnight. He's still awake. "Yes, sir," he said he couldn't sleep. William stood up. "I'll go see him now." When William knocked on the door of Alex's suite, the boy answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting right by the door. "You wanted to see me?" William asked. Alex nodded, stepping back to let William enter. The TV was on with the volume low, playing an old cartoon. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate beside a glass of milk. "I couldn't sleep," Alex said, switching off the TV. "I keep thinking about what you said earlier." William took a seat on the couch. "About becoming your guardian?" "Yeah." Alex sat down across from William, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about my mom." "That's understandable." Alex picked at a loose thread on his new sweatshirt. "She used to tell me that when bad things happen, we can either let them break us, or we can use them to build something better." He looked up at William. "I think that's what you're trying to do, build something better." William was surprised by the boy's insight. "I'm trying," he admitted. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Alex said quietly. "And I think she would want me to say yes to your offer." He took a deep breath. "So that's what I'm doing. I'm saying yes." William felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "I'm glad, Alex. We'll make this work, I promise you." "But I have one condition," Alex added, his voice suddenly stronger. "What's that?" "I want to visit my mom's grave. I never got to say goodbye properly. After she died, everything happened so fast with the funeral, and then my dad leaving." Alex's voice cracked slightly. "I don't even know if she has a headstone." William felt a pang in his chest. This child had lost everything and still his thoughts were with his mother. Of course we can visit her. First thing tomorrow, if you'd like. Alex nodded gratefully. Then he asked, "What will happen to those people?" "The ones who made the mistake with my mom's insurance." It was a complicated question with no easy answer. William chose his words carefully. The specific employees weren't at fault. They were overwhelmed because their department had been reduced from 12 people to just 3. The fault lies with the decision-makers who cut those positions without proper planning. "People like you?" Alex asked bluntly. William met the boy's gaze. "Yes, people like me who approved the investment without considering the human cost. That's why I'm going to make changes, not just for you, but for the whole system." "What kind of changes?" "For starters, a complete review of all healthcare companies we invest in, new ethical guidelines for cost-cutting measures, and financial support for families impacted by corporate negligence." William leaned forward. "But I can't do it alone. I could use someone with your perspective to keep me honest." Alex looked surprised. "Me? I'm just a kid." "A kid who's seen both sides of the system," William pointed out. "Sometimes the people at the top forget what their decisions look like from the bottom. You could help remind me." For the first time since they'd met, Alex smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Mom would have liked that. She always said people with power should listen more to people without it. "Your mother was right," William said. "And speaking of your mother, there's something else you should know." He hesitated, unsure how Alex would take the news. "The cemetery where she's buried. It's not far from my home in Connecticut. If you come to live with me, you'll be able to visit her regularly." Alex's eyes widened. "Really?" William nodded. "Really, it's strange how things connect sometimes." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Alex spoke again. "William, thank you. Not just for the nice hotel and the clothes and stuff, but for being honest with me. Most adults lie to kids when things get complicated." The words hit William hard. In his world of corporate deals and investment strategies, honesty was often the first casualty. But this child, who had every reason to be mistrustful, was thanking him for the simple act of telling the truth. "I promise I'll always be honest with you, Alex," William said, "even when it's difficult." "And I'll be honest with you too," Alex replied. "Like right now, I'm really hungry again. Do you think we could order pizza?" William laughed, the tension of the evening breaking. "Absolutely. Extra cheese. And pepperoni," Alex added with another small smile. As William reached for the phone to order their midnight snack, he realized something had shifted within him. For years, he had measured success in dollars and cents, in profitable quarters and market share. But sitting here with this brave, resilient boy, he was beginning to see a different kind of wealth, one that couldn't be tracked on any balance sheet. Alex nodded gratefully. Then he asked, "What will happen to those people?" "The ones who made the mistake with my mom's insurance." It was a complicated question with no easy answer. William chose his words carefully. The specific employees weren't at fault. They were overwhelmed because their department had been reduced from 12 people to just 3. The fault lies with the decision-makers who cut those positions without proper planning. "People like you?" Alex asked bluntly. William met the boy's gaze. "Yes, people like me who approved the investment without considering the human cost. That's why I'm going to make changes, not just for you, but for the whole system." "What kind of changes?" "For starters, a complete review of all healthcare companies we invest in, new ethical guidelines for cost-cutting measures, and financial support for families impacted by corporate negligence." William leaned forward. "But I can't do it alone. I could use someone with your perspective to keep me honest." Alex looked surprised. "Me? I'm just a kid." "A kid who's seen both sides of the system," William pointed out. "Sometimes the people at the top forget what their decisions look like from the bottom. You could help remind me." For the first time since they'd met, Alex smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Mom would have liked that. She always said people with power should listen more to people without it. "Your mother was right," William said. "And speaking of your mother, there's something else you should know." He hesitated, unsure how Alex would take the news. "The cemetery where she's buried. It's not far from my home in Connecticut. If you come to live with me, you'll be able to visit her regularly. Alex's eyes widened. Really? William nodded. Really, it's strange how things connect sometimes. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Alex spoke again. William? Thank you. Not just for the nice hotel and the clothes and stuff, but for being honest with me. Most adults lie to kids when things get complicated. The words hit William hard. In his world of corporate deals and investment strategies, honesty was often the first casualty. But this child, who had every reason to be mistrustful, was thanking him for the simple act of telling the truth. I promise I'll always be honest with you, Alex, William said, even when it's difficult. And I'll be honest with you too, Alex replied. Like right now, I'm really hungry again. Do you think we could order pizza? William laughed, the tension of the evening breaking. Absolutely. Extra cheese. And pepperoni. Alex added with another small smile. As William reached for the phone to order their midnight snack, he realized something had shifted within him. For years, he had measured success in dollars and cents, in profitable quarters and market share. But sitting here with this brave, resilient boy, he was beginning to see a different kind of wealth, one that couldn't be tracked on any balance sheet. The morning was cold and gray as William's car pulled through the wrought iron gates of Oakwood Cemetery. Rain threatened in the heavy clouds overhead, matching the solemn mood inside the vehicle. Alex sat quietly in the back seat, a small bunch of white daisies clutched in his hands. They had been his mother's favorite. We're almost there, William said gently. Alex nodded but didn't speak. He hadn't said much since they'd left the hotel that morning. This was the moment he'd been both longing for and dreading, saying a proper goodbye to his mother. The car stopped on a narrow cemetery road, and their driver pointed toward a section of graves on a small hill. It's up there, sir, row 17, plot 23. Would you like me to come with you? William asked Alex. The boy hesitated, then shook his head. I need to do this alone, if that's okay. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll wait here. Alex climbed out of the car, his new sneakers crunching on the gravel path. The cemetery was peaceful, with old trees swaying gently in the breeze. He walked slowly up the hill, counting the rows until he reached the 17th. Then he moved along the headstones, reading each name until he found plot 23. His heart sank. There was no headstone, just a small metal marker pushed into the ground with his mother's name, birth date, and death date. No words about who she had been, what she had meant to the world. Nothing to show that Catherine Morgan had been a loving mother, a dedicated professional, a person who had mattered. Alex knelt on the damp grass, placing the daisies carefully by the marker. Hi, Mom, he whispered, his voice catching. I'm sorry I haven't been here before now. I'm sorry about a lot of things. Back in the car, William watched the small figure kneeling by the grave. His phone buzzed with incoming messages, his board members demanding updates, his lawyers warning about potential PR problems if he pursued action against Hellfirst. He silenced the phone without reading the messages. Those problems could wait. Right now, a boy saying goodbye to his mother was the only thing that mattered. The phone call to his board that morning had not gone well. When William had announced his intention to launch a full investigation into Hellfirst's practices and establish a victims' compensation fund, the reaction had been swift and hostile. You're risking millions in shareholder value over one unfortunate case, board member Harold Wilson had argued. This is a dangerous precedent, William. It's the right thing to do, William had replied firmly. The right thing for your conscience, perhaps, another board member had snapped, but not for the company. If we open this door, where does it end? Every corporate decision impacts someone somewhere. Those words had stayed with William. Every corporate decision impacts someone somewhere. For too long, he had viewed business as a game of numbers, of profit and loss. But standing in this cemetery, watching a boy mourn the mother he had lost to streamline deficiencies, the true cost of those decisions was impossible to ignore. A light rain began to fall, but Alex remained kneeling by the grave. William grabbed an umbrella from the car and walked up the hill, approaching slowly to give the boy space. As he got closer, he could hear Alex talking quietly to his mother, telling her about everything that had happened since she died. And he wants to be my guardian, Mom. I think you'd like him. He makes mistakes, but he tries to fix them. like you always taught me to do. William stopped, not wanting to intrude on this private moment. But Alex looked up, sensing his presence, and gave a small nod. William stepped forward, opening the umbrella to shield them both from the increasing rain. "She doesn't even have a real headstone," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. William looked down at the simple metal marker, disgust rising within him. "Catherine Morgan deserved better than this. We can change that," he said. "We can give her a proper headstone with whatever words you want on it." Alex wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'd like that." They stood together in silence for a moment, rain pattering on the umbrella above them. "I've been thinking," William said finally, "about what your mother would want for you, and about what I can do to honor her memory." Alex looked up questioningly. "I had a long talk with my lawyers last night after you went to sleep. We're going to start a foundation in your mother's name. The Catherine Morgan Foundation will help families affected by healthcare failures and push for better patient protection laws." Alex's eyes widened. "Really? You'd do that for my mom? For your mom, for you, and for all the other families who've suffered because people like me didn't pay enough attention to the human cost of our business decisions." William took a deep breath. "But there's more. My board of directors isn't happy about it." "Why not?" "Because it will cost a lot of money, and because admitting we were wrong opens the company to legal problems. Several board members have threatened to force me out if I go forward with this plan." Alex frowned. "So you might lose your job because of me." "Not because of you," William corrected firmly. "Because it's the right thing to do. And honestly, if that's the kind of company they want to run, one where profit matters more than people, then maybe I don't want to be part of it anymore." "But your company is worth billions," Alex said, remembering what he'd read about William in discarded newspapers. "You'd give that up?" William looked down at Catherine Morgan's grave, then back at the boy who had somehow changed his entire worldview in less than a week. "Some things are worth more than money, Alex. Your mother understood that. I'm just starting to learn it." A loud clap of thunder sounded overhead, and the rain began to fall harder. William put his hand gently on Alex's shoulder. "We should get back to the car. We can come again whenever you want." Alex nodded, but before turning to leave, he placed his hand on the metal marker. "Bye, Mom," he whispered. "I'm going to be okay now. I promise." As they walked back to the car, Alex asked, "What happens next?" William opened the car door, shielding Alex from the rain. "Next we go home, my home in Connecticut. It'll be your home too now. We'll get you settled, find a good school, and start building a new life. And in the meantime, I'll be having some very difficult conversations with my board and making some big changes to how my company does business." "Do you think they'll really fire you?" Alex asked as they drove away from the cemetery. William smiled slightly. "They can try. But I founded that company and I still own enough shares to make things very difficult for them. Besides, once the press hears about a billionaire choosing ethics over profit, public opinion will be on our side." For the first time that day, Alex smiled too, a small, fragile smile, but real nonetheless. "My mom would have liked that. She always said rich people could change the world if they wanted to, they just usually don't want to badly enough." "Your mother was a wise woman," William said. "I wish I could have met her." "Me too," Alex said quietly. Then, after a moment of silence, he added, "But I'm glad I met you." As the car pulled away from Oakwood Cemetery, the rain began to ease. A patch of blue sky appeared between the clouds, sending a single ray of sunlight down upon the rows of graves behind them, a small beacon of hope on an otherwise gray day. 6 months later, a crowd gathered outside a renovated building in downtown New York City. The formerly abandoned office complex now gleamed with fresh paint and new windows. A large sign above the entrance read, "The Hayes Family Foundation Center for Youth." Below it, in slightly smaller letters, "In honor of Catherine Morgan." William stood on a small platform near the entrance, microphone in hand. Beside him, Alex fidgeted nervously in a button-up shirt and new jeans. At 13, he had grown 2 inches in the past 6 months. Regular meals, a safe home, and proper medical care had worked wonders. The dark circles under his eyes were gone, replaced by the healthy glow of a boy who slept soundly through the night. "Thank you all for coming today," William began, addressing the crowd of reporters, city officials, and curious onlookers. 6 months ago, I was a very different person leading a very different life. I measured success in dollars and market share. I made decisions that looked good on spreadsheets without considering their impact on real people. He glanced at Alex, who gave him an encouraging nod. Then, on a rainy day much like this one, a brave young man stopped me from eating a sandwich. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. It sounds funny now, but that simple act changed everything. That young man is Alex Morgan, and today he stands beside me not as a homeless child, but as my ward and the inspiration for the center we're opening today. Cameras flashed as Alex gave a shy wave. In the front row, Rita from Child Protective Services beamed proudly. She had worked closely with William to make Alex's guardianship official and develop the programs for the new center. The Hayes Family Foundation Center will provide emergency housing for up to 50 children at a time, William continued. But it's not just a shelter. It will offer healthcare, education, legal assistance, and family reunification services when appropriate. Our goal is not just to give kids a place to sleep, but to give them back their futures. What William didn't mention in his speech was the price he had paid for this moment. As he had predicted, his board had tried to force him out when he refused to back down from his plans to investigate Health First and establish the Victims Fund. The resulting power struggle had been ugly and public. William had ultimately maintained control of his company, but several board members had resigned in protest, and the company's stock had temporarily dropped. None of that mattered now, though. Not when he looked at the children already enrolled in the center's programs, kids who, like Alex, had fallen through the cracks of a broken system. After cutting the ribbon and giving reporters a tour of the facility, William and Alex escaped to a quiet office on the top floor. Alex collapsed into a chair, loosening his collar. "That wasn't so bad," he said with a grin. "You did great," William assured him. "Your mother would be proud." At the mention of his mother, Alex's expression softened. They visited her grave regularly now. A beautiful headstone had replaced the metal marker, engraved with words Alex had chosen himself: "Catherine Morgan, beloved mother and guardian angel. She taught us to watch out for each other." "Do you think this center will really help kids like me?" Alex asked. "I do," William said, "but we're just getting started. The foundation is already looking at locations in 3 other cities." There was a knock at the door, and Tom, Williams' lawyer, poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but they're ready for you in the conference room." William nodded. "We'll be right there." After Tom left, he turned back to Alex. "Are you sure you're ready for this part?" Alex took a deep breath and stood up. "I'm sure." Together, they walked to the conference room, where 20 children and teenagers sat around a large table. All of them had lost parents due to healthcare failures, insurance denials, medical errors, or corporate negligence. They were the first recipients of the Catherine Morgan Foundation scholarships and the first participants in the center's advocacy training program. "Everyone, this is Alex," William said as they entered. "As I told you earlier, he's the reason we're all here today." A girl about Alex's age with curly hair and bright eyes raised her hand. "Is it true that you were homeless when you met Mr. Hayes?" Alex nodded. "For 8 months. After my mom died and my dad left, I didn't have anywhere to go. The foster home didn't work out, so I lived on the streets." "Weren't you scared?" a younger boy asked. "Every day," Alex admitted. "But you do what you have to do to survive." "And then you saved a billionaire from food poisoning," an older teen said with a hint of disbelief in his voice. Alex laughed. "I just did what my mom taught me to do: speak up when something's wrong, even if it's scary." "That's exactly why you're all here today," William interjected, "because each of you has experienced something wrong in our healthcare system, and together we're going to speak up about it to lawmakers, to hospital boards, to insurance companies. Your stories have power." As the meeting continued, Alex found himself sharing more about his experiences, the good and the bad. He talked about his mother, about life on the streets, about his fears and hopes. The other kids listened intently, then began sharing their own stories. By the end of the hour, the room buzzed with energy and ideas. "We should write letters to Congress. We could make videos telling our stories. What about a march in Washington?" William smiled as he watched the exchange. These children, who had every reason to be bitter and defeated, were instead channeling their pain into purpose. Later, as they drove back to Connecticut, Alex was unusually quiet, staring out the car window at the passing scenery. "Everything okay?" William asked. "You seemed a little overwhelmed at the end there." Alex turned to him. "I was just thinking about how weird life is. 6 months ago, I was digging through dumpsters for food. Now I'm helping run a foundation named after my mom." He shook his head in wonder. "All because I yelled at a stranger about a sandwich." William chuckled. "Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences." "Yeah." Alex was quiet for another moment, then asked, "Do you ever regret it? Taking me in, fighting with your board, starting the foundation. It caused you a lot of trouble." William considered the question seriously. The past 6 months had indeed been challenging, full of legal battles, public scrutiny, and difficult confrontations. His life would certainly have been easier if he'd simply walked away from the small, dirty boy who had warned him about a sandwich. "Not for a single second," he said finally. "Some trouble is worth having, Alex." As they pulled into the long driveway of William's Connecticut home, their home now, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Alex had his own room here, with bookshelves full of science books and a telescope positioned by the window. He attended a nearby private school, where he was slowly catching up on the education he had missed. It wasn't perfect. Alex still had nightmares sometimes. He still hoarded food in his room, a habit from his months of hunger that was hard to break. And William still faced criticism from business associates who thought he had gone soft, prioritizing social responsibility over maximum profit. But as they walked into the house together, neither the man nor the boy would have traded their new life for anything in the world. Because sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most meaningful journeys. And sometimes a simple act of kindness, like warning a stranger not to eat a contaminated sandwich, can change not just 2 lives, but countless others. That, Alex thought as he looked up at the stars appearing in the evening sky, would have made his mother very happy indeed.